Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker. My name's Robert Whitelaw, and I am the Rebel Broker, licensed real estate broker in the state of California, member of the National Association of Realtors. But please don't hold that against me. We have an interesting one today, folks. For those of you who are listening to the podcast, we're going to cover all of the data. I'll make sure and discuss all of it. But for those of you watching the video version that you can find on YouTube, we'll be showing you some of the data points that I'm going to be discussing today. But today is really sort of an exploration of stupid, right? So we occasionally on this show will cover things like what are some of the dumbest things being said, or what are the things being left out via omission that folks are saying. And one of the more popular formats of discussion, right? So there's all these various websites, particularly in the world of real estate, are looking to grab your attention with something. And an article came out titled, "Is San Francisco a Good Place to Live? 10 Pros and Cons to Help You Decide." And I thought that was interesting. Obviously, they do this for tons of cities all across the country because the goal is to generate traffic to their websites. So they try to get that whole SEO thing going on. I suppose we can just call it that. But boy, talk about misrepresenting through omission the reality. So let's get into it. This is an article from Redfin, and this is a frequent thing I find with Redfin. If you are looking for good sources on an honest assessment of what the good and bad of a place is, given this as an example, probably not going to be Redfin as my go-to source for this kind of stuff. So let's go ahead and take a look first at just this article to kind of get calibrated to it, and I'll include a link to it in the description show notes so that you can check it out for yourself, see if I'm just full of baloney. But we're going to cover some of their main points. This came out on March 6th, and it lays out what it says in its headline, where it wants to give you the pros and cons of living in San Francisco. And I don't disagree with any of the pros. Beautiful scenery, mild weather. It's really cold in San Francisco, so I don't know if I'd call it mild. Now, before we get into this, because I don't want to really get anybody upset that I'm speaking out of turn, I was born in San Francisco. I've lived in the San Francisco Bay Area my whole life. I've spent a ton of time in San Francisco. I've even had the misfortune of helping clients who moved from where I live in the southern Silicon Valley area into San Francisco with business up there. Speaking as a native son of San Francisco, I'm going to say this is full of crap. Beaches are fantastic. You got to be used to the cold, right? It's a coastal town. There's lots of fog. Fog is the thing. Active outdoor opportunities, absolutely. Being an innovation and technology hub, yeah, kinda. I mean, there are definitely some high-tech places right there in downtown San Francisco. I wouldn't go there for the innovation and technology hub center of Silicon Valley, though. San Francisco is not the center of Silicon Valley. Sunnyvale, Santa Clara, San Jose, you're going to find far more high-tech south of San Francisco than you're going to find in San Francisco, despite what companies like Twitter and Twitch and might want you to think. Delicious food scene? Absolutely. I know back in the day, I know some of you know this, not all of you know this, but I did spend some time in the 90s as a emergency medical technician driving an ambulance, and nobody knows where to find the best food better than cops and ambulance guys, EMTs and paramedics and firefighters. And the great news is when you're driving an ambulance, you can park anywhere you want. So yeah, whenever I used to have to be an EMT assigned to San Francisco, man, was there awesome food up there. That was one of the perks, was amazing food. Now the cons. And this is where we have to stop and pause, because we wander into the what the hell were you thinking zone when it comes to cons. The first one on their list is limited outdoor space in some areas. Well, yeah. We can categorize that in the understatement of the year bucket. Sky-high housing prices, absolutely. No question about it. Prices do range. There are some areas where prices aren't going to cost you as much, but as we're going to discuss in a moment, those are areas where you're probably not going to want to be. Steep hills and challenging topography, absolutely. If you want to get exercise and you plan on walking around town, which is probably a lot more sane than driving around town, you're going to need to get used to the hills. There are some areas where that's not as much of a thing, but it's definitely one of the main features of San Francisco. Heavy traffic congestion and limited parking, Absolutely. In fact, the city of San Francisco even seems hostile to providing parking, which is a little bit dumb, but boy, do they seem to not be interested in allowing more parking to get created. And then, of course, there's the earthquake risk, which is true of everywhere. Earthquake problems, obviously, historically for San Francisco have been a big deal, whether we're talking about the quake in 98 or, the turn of the century after 1900. Boy, I lived in the area when the quake of 98 hit, and it was... It actually happened on October 17th, 1998 at 5:07 p.m. And I was in a college classroom, in a basement classroom at the time. So that was a fun one. But yeah, that's absolutely a thing. So, but what is shocking about this is the omission. If you wanted to come up with things to talk about relating to San Francisco that should be on cons of San Francisco, the fact that they don't mention anything about crime, homelessness, human and dog waste on the streets. It's mind-boggling. As I said, I've been to San Francisco quite a few times. I have been to San Francisco recently, and I have been there where even in areas that you would figure you wouldn't bump into these things, right? If there's going to be a police presence anywhere, it's going to be right at that main BART station right there near the stadium, and then you'd be walking to big businesses. Nope. You're going to find people taking a dump on the street, even in those areas. You're going to find drug use in those areas, homeless people in those areas, cars getting broken into in those areas. Even in the areas you would think it wouldn't happen. Now, there are some neighborhoods that have quite a bit lower crime, or at least have had a substantially lower increase in crime over the last few years than other areas. But to not mention those at all, and as you can see, this is the end of the article. The last thing it says is earthquake risk. Without going on any further. And I thought it would be good, since we like to focus on Silicon Valley here, and while San Francisco is not one of my primary markets, I don't tend to do business in San Francisco. It is a huge pain to deal with San Francisco, so I tend to not go up there. But I thought it would be good to calibrate, because I will occasionally talk to folks who live locally who want to buy an investment property in San Francisco, which is also an interesting proposition due to the hostility of the Board of Supervisors of San Francisco to most folks who are landlords rather than residents of their homes. But that's probably a story for another time. So let's go ahead and hit first. It happens so frequently that the San Francisco Chronicle created a page to simply track it. That is how much car break-ins happen in San Francisco. And according to this, using this map, you can track in close to real time the number and locations of car break-ins occurring across San Francisco and see the areas of reported incidents dating back to 2018. So you can conclude from that since 2018, since before the pandemic, this has been a huge problem. So much of this has to do with an unwillingness on the part of the city of San Francisco and the district attorney and whatnot to prosecute different things. But just take a look at this map. This is the last 7 days. This isn't the last month. Up near Russian Hill, 62 incidents of car break-ins. Just south of it, 33. Between, and I'm sure this 33 is probably a lot of that is Tenderloin related, but then there were 3 between Tenderloin and Hayes Valley. Hayes Valley has 22. Just ridiculous numbers. The areas with the lowest are arguably the areas that are getting the furthest out of San Francisco, like Bayshore, Silver Terrace, Glen Park, Excelsior, much lower numbers. But even far over here on the west side, near the Great Highway, we've got 3, we've got 4, 6, 7. And again, these are the last week. So on average, in this area, you had 1 a day. In this area, you had 1 shy of 1 a day. On this one, you had just over half of the days of the week managed to get a car break-in in there. So this is what you're dealing with in San Francisco. It's shocking. It happens so frequently that I actually know folks who are former clients who live down here and occasionally have to go up to San Francisco because the main offices of someone they're dealing with is there, or their main offices are there, and they have to go in once every week or two. And they will roll down their windows and put up a sign that say nothing of value in the car. I have one who literally 50% of the time that she has parked in San Francisco, she has gotten her car broken into, where there's nothing visible. So it's not even I see something in the car I want. They want to just break in, open up that center console and see if you've got any change sitting in the center console. So the fact that this isn't brought up is mind-boggling. If we look back on if we go further than 7 days, if we go back the last 30 days, look at that, 167 in this area, 60 here, 75 there. I mean, these numbers are staggering in terms of the number of issues relating to car break-ins. If we just look at the last 24 hours, 2 here, 2 here, 2 here. Looks like that's maybe just 1. Yeah. The dots without a number in it are just 1. But even that's ridiculous, right? For basically on Sunday, and this is probably just Sunday, and this is probably in all cases probably haven't been reported yet. These numbers are ridiculous. So that's number one. Number one on the hit parade is car break-ins. It's a ridiculous problem that's been going on for a long time, even before 2018. I can recall going back to 15, 16, 17, where this was still a problem. It's reached kind of a peak, but it's still ridiculous. Now let's take a look at another aspect, not just breaking into your car crime. Let's talk about businesses being broken into. Now this is a story from February 22nd. Josie Lee felt the sinking feeling as she arrived at her beauty spa on Polk Street in mid-January. Not again. Thieves had broken into her spa in Polk Gulch. So breaking into a spa, right? If you're thinking about the prioritization of what stores would criminals break into, maybe electronics, jewelry stores, right? No, this is a spa. The most common things they're going to have are towels, robes, soap, loofahs, maybe. But they'd broken into the Polk Gulch, taking electronics and cash, but this time they'd also looted her makeup collection, the fourth burglary at La Boutique Salon in the last year. Some merchants say the repeat burglaries make doing business in the city untenable, which has ominous implications for a city reeling with an exodus of downtown business anchors, tens of thousands of tech layoffs, and a drug and homelessness problem that has made it a target of criticism across the nation. While violent crime in San Francisco remains well below its heights back in the 1990s, the city suffers from high rates of property crime. Commercial burglaries take a toll on neighborhoods, said San Francisco Chamber of Commerce CEO Rodney Fong. So just to pause on that for a minute, for those of you who like to read critically and decide for yourselves, I would call BS on that statement pretty quick. My guess is that the definition of what a violent crime has been changed since the 1990s. Knowing people who live in San Francisco, every time I get together socially with someone, last week, for instance, I was in Mountain View, and I happened to bump into a former client, and we started talking, and one of their friends that happened to be with them lived in San Francisco, and we got to talking. Every single time I bump into someone who lives in San Francisco, stuff like this comes up, and people who've lived there for decades, and including this person who's lived there since the 80s, and was talking about how it's never been this bad. It has never been as bad as it is today in San Francisco. So my guess is what qualifies as a quote-unquote violent crime, this is either just plain out incorrect, or they've redefined what violent crime is, as they've done on the federal level. The federal level has actually redefined what violent crime is. There's a lot of things we could talk about there, but in order to jury up the numbers or jury rig the numbers a little bit, or gin them up, a lot of areas have changed how they define various crimes without really making the distinction when they're comparing these numbers to decades past when the numbers actually were representative of different crimes. Let's see. San Francisco police spokesperson Sergeant Adam Lobzinger said burglaries of all kinds rose citywide over the past 3 years. And I think that's the only other sexy thing. Well, okay, commercial burglaries in San Francisco, 2018, 19, 20, 21, 22. And that's the clearance rate, which is actually pretty sad. And I wouldn't be surprised. I'm actually kind of surprised that we're not seeing more in 2022 than we did in those other 2 years. Quote, the good news is that violent crime is under control, said Supervisor Aaron Peskin. The bad news is that robberies and property crime are out of control. This was the other bit I wanted you guys to see here. So this is reported burglaries per 1,000 registered businesses from 2018 to 2022. Here's the change. So up 39.2 in the Tenderloin, and even in areas like the Presidio. And if you want to buy a house in the Presidio, you need to come to the game with millions of dollars. Is still up 1.8. So even in areas where, because of the demographics of the super rich people living there, they're still seeing an increase in those areas. Next, rising crime in San Francisco. Let's see. Recent incidents confirmed by San Francisco police include a mail carrier robbed at gunpoint by a woman on La Playa between Irving and Judah Streets on the afternoon of February 17th. The next day, a bustling holiday weekend Saturday, gunshots rang out in the late morning near the busy chain of lakes entrance to Golden Gate Park at Lincoln Way and 45th Avenue, damaging a car that was passing by. The San Francisco Police Department crime data shows that homes and businesses in the Terraville Police District, which covers from Golden Gate Park's southern edge to the San Mateo County border, are increasingly being targeted for property crimes. Property crimes reported to San Francisco Terraville Police District from 2018 to now, and we're seeing motor vehicle theft and burglary at the highest ever in terms of motor vehicle theft, and only down since 2021 in terms of overall burglaries. Robberies have remained relatively flat, but I'd be interested. I get so many people telling me about robberies in San Francisco. I have a hard time believing that hasn't increased more. It looks like it's increased since 2020, but it just looks a little too flat for me based on the anecdotal experience I have with folks I've talked to who live in San Francisco. In terms of year-over-year changes in larceny theft between 2021 and 2022, we can see that larceny theft by police station down in Bayview and Park, but up everywhere else. Numbers don't tell the whole story, and anecdotally, residents and store owners say they have never seen Sunset crime as bad as in recent years. And that's absolutely what I hear. Some of my folks don't actually live in Sunset, but they live in other areas, but have the same thing to say about what's going on. And I think that's all I wanted to pull out from this particular article. Finally, if you do a quick search on articles like the Redfin one, what are the pros and cons of San Francisco? What's it really like living in San Francisco? 12 things you need to know. They talk about some of those things we talked about, home prices. There's a neighborhood for everyone. There are an awful lot of different neighborhoods in San Francisco, so that's a good thing. The Golden Gate Bridge sings. That is also a true thing. Homeless issue. At least these folks bring this up. Any article about living in San Francisco that doesn't mention this problem is simply not dealing with reality. And this feeds so many other problems. The whole relieving themselves in public spaces, on sidewalks, sleeping in doorways, drug needles, all that other kind of wonderful stuff. That all feeds off of the homeless situation that we see in San Francisco. And if someone wants to meet with me at a Starbucks or have an adult beverage somewhere, I've had an awful lot of interactions with the homeless community during my time as an EMT, and we can have a chat about that, because I think that actually interacting with the homeless community gives you a perspective that's rarely discussed honestly in most news outlets. I think that some of the solutions out there really don't acknowledge the real problems, but things that talk about mental health issues and addiction, I think are valid ones and absolutely should be part of any solution. But San Francisco is just ignoring it. And the bottom line is that needs to stop. And the things that are being permitted, the actions that are being permitted, just can't be allowed to continue, right? It's a health risk. It's a safety risk. There is no upside to just allowing the things that are being allowed to be done to continue. So I think that there's definitely some solutions that need to be implemented. The fog is crazy. It even has a name. Absolutely true. And you may get trapped inside by smoky air. Yeah, this is a thing, but it's rare. Living in San Francisco can be dealing with smoke from wildfires to the north, to the east, all over. There's places where wildfires happen, and that's a thing, but it's going to happen. It's not a yearly thing. It's not a seasonal thing. It happens once in a great while when we get crazy wildfires. I'm not sure I would have put that on this list. Seasons are funky. They are indeed. Tons of things to see and do. San Francisco public schools tend to be better than in other big cities. That is very much a hit or miss in San Francisco, by the way. Be careful where you decide to move to make sure you're getting a quality education. You'll need to watch where you step. I love this one because this is kind of the one I really wanted to get to. When you first start living in San Francisco, you might notice the abundance of dogs. In fact, there are more dogs than kids living here. And what does that mean? Poop. While most dog owners are pretty good about picking up after their pooches, you'll still run into smears of dog poop on a lot of street corners. Yes, you will, but it's not all dog poop. You can go up on the internet and find tons of photographic evidence of how the poop gets dropped onto the sidewalks in San Francisco. And I would bet that despite what this article wants you to believe, a huge percentage of it is not dog poop. And as someone who's had to walk around in San Francisco, you got to always be keeping your, and I'll tell you what, something else. If you're walking your dog and it poops on the sidewalk, I can guarantee you that someone else is walking on that street. And if you just try to leave it there, you're going to get yelled at. So the odds of it being dog poop are far lower than of it being human poop. San Francisco is the smallest big city there is. Okay, whatever. And that's it. So some interesting things mentioned here. And it just boggles my mind when an organization like Redfin just has to put the happiest smiley face on anything that it's discussing without bringing to the table the realities that are so impactful to people who live in San Francisco. The idea that if you just read that list and you were someone who had just gotten a job offer from someplace in San Francisco and you were about to consider moving there, or you were just going to move there, you're operating off of a completely wrong impression of what will actually affect you every single day you're there. This problem is an everyday thing. You are dealing with it every single day you are there. And right now, the biggest advice I give to people who I'm talking to who are talking about moving to San Francisco is don't park on the street. If you're buying a house, make sure you've either got a condo that has secured parking that locks up, which even then isn't a guarantee. That stuff happens in some of these secured parking garages frequently, but that, or have a garage with a garage door that closes, and make sure you park your car in it. Don't make it your storage unit. Make it your place to park your car. So I just thought I'd share that. There every once in a while, a story will come along that shocks me as being so missing the point that you have to just call it out. And so I thought I'd call it out to you. And as always, in the spirit of leaving more knowledge on the table than I take up in your time, I hope that we have achieved that today. Thank you all for listening, and I'll talk to you all next time.